Imagine this. You're in Delphi, right?
Yeah.
Just a normal day, maybe grabbing some things at CVS, and bam, you find out the guy behind the counter is at the center of this huge GE murder trial. 7 years this has been going on. It's the kind of thing that rocks a town like Delphi to its core, and that's why we're doing this deep dive. This is about the Delphi murders, Libby German and Abby Williams back in 2017. But here's the thing. The trial is finally happening for their accused killer, Richard Allen.
And it's gripped true crime fans for years, this case. And not just because of the tragedy, 2 eighth graders gone, but because of what they left behind. The clues. The clues that came straight from Libby's own phone.
Okay, so let's back up a sec for anyone who hasn't been following every single update. It's February 13th, 2017, small town America, picture perfect.
Yep.
Libby and Abby are dropped off to spend the afternoon at this place called the Moon on High Bridge. It's this old abandoned rail line, kind of beautiful, kind of isolated. You know the type, idyllic, but also a little creepy looking back, right?
And that isolation, well, it became a big factor. Not a lot of witnesses, a really contained crime scene. And those things, they made the initial mystery even murkier. Especially when the girls didn't show up to get a ride home.
Vanished. Every parent's nightmare. Those first few hours, they must have been agonizing. You don't know if your kids just wandered off or if something much, much worse happened.
And sadly, the next day, their bodies were found. This missing persons case became a full-blown homicide investigation.
And what did the police have to go on in those early days?
Not much. Leads were scarce. It's not hard to see why this case went cold for so long. Small town, not many potential witnesses, not a lot of forensic evidence at the scene. It all added up to dead ends for investigators. But then, bam, they dropped this bombshell evidence right there on Libby's phone.
You're talking about that photo.
Yes, a blurry photo, but still, a man on that bridge that day. Not clear enough to get a positive ID right away, but enough to make everyone nervous.
And then there's the audio.
Chilling. A voice, we think it's the man in the photo, saying, guys, down the hill. Like a window into those final moments, and recorded by Libby herself. Not just evidence, but a haunting echo.
So rare to get something from the victim's perspective like that. Heartbreaking, sure, but so valuable to the investigation. So you have a small town, on edge, this unsettling evidence, and then silence. For years, no arrests, no major breaks, just quiet.
5 long years, and then suddenly in 2022, a name emerges. Richard Allen, local guy, worked at the CVS in town. I even read he developed photos for Libby's family.
Can you imagine the shock when he was arrested and charged? 2 counts of murder.
And not just murder, but felony murder, which means
A much more serious sentence.
up to 130 years if convicted. This is serious. The prosecution's not messing around.
It's like ripped for the headlines, right? This seemingly average guy living his life, suddenly he's the accused. But here's where it gets really crazy. It's not just the arrest. It's what they say Allen did after.
The confessions.
Right, the confessions.
And not just one,
Yeah.
multiple.
Multiple. Okay, now I'm really interested. So what happened?
Court documents allege Allen confessed, get this, to prison staff, to other inmates, even to his wife on a recorded phone call.
His wife. On a recording.
Yeah.
That's chilling. You'd think that'd be it, case closed, right? But I'm guessing it's not that simple.
Nope, not that simple. And that's where Allen's defense attorneys come in. They're saying, hold on, not so fast. They're claiming he's innocent, that these confessions, they aren't reliable.
Because of his mental state, right? That's what we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. They're saying he's got these, well, serious mental health challenges, delusions, memory issues, and these issues, they argue, those could have made him confess to things he didn't actually do or to misremember what happened altogether.
So the jury has a tough job here. How do you decide what's reliable when someone's mental state is a factor?
It's one of the hardest things a jury has to do. And there's another layer here. For a confession to be allowed as evidence, the judge has to decide if it's admissible, and to do that, it has to meet certain standards. Was Allen read his Miranda rights? Were these confessions given freely, or were they coerced? The judge has to consider all of that before the jury even hears about them.
It's complicated. And just when you thought it couldn't get any weirder, the defense throws in, what was it, the Odinism thing?
Yeah, they're suggesting that Libby and Abby's deaths weren't random. Instead, they're claiming it was a ritualistic sacrifice connected to Odinism, this pagan Norse religion.
I have to admit, even I had to look that one up. Odinism. Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. Odinism is basically a modern take on these old Norse beliefs, like pre-Christian, with gods like Odin and Thor. But here's the thing. While a lot of people practice Odinism peacefully, some extremist groups, especially white nationalist groups, they've taken some of those symbols and ideas and, well, twisted them, for sure. The defense seems to be saying there's a link to the murders based on how the girls were found, possible symbols they say were at the scene, that kind of thing.
Honestly, that seems like a stretch, doesn't it?
It's a bold strategy, that's for sure. And the prosecution isn't buying it. They said publicly that it's a fanciful defense for social media.
Ouch. They didn't know back.
Nope. Even the judge was skeptical, saying this Odinism angle could mislead the jury. You have to remember the prosecution, they have to focus on building a solid case against Allen, and this just feels like a distraction.
So we have all these threads. Was this a random act of violence or something planned, like a ritual? Or something else entirely? And what about Richard Allen? Cold-blooded killer or a man struggling with mental illness who is caught in this terrible situation? It's true crime, but it's real life. You know what I mean? And the stakes are so high. As we're talking, the trial is happening right now. Jury selection started this month, October 2024. 7 years, almost to the day, after Libby and Abby were murdered.
7 years is a long time to wait for answers, and this trial, it's huge for Delphi. They've been living with this, the grief, the suspicion, the fear, and now they just want some kind of resolution, some closure.
So everyone's glued to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the big things to watch for as this goes forward? Besides the obvious, guilty or not guilty, what's the evidence that will decide this?
Those confessions, that's going to be key. The defense, they'll do anything to keep them out, to say they're not valid because of Allen's mental state. If they manage that, the prosecution, they've got a much tougher case.
It really makes you think about those recordings. If they can't use them, what are they left with?
Right. And on that note, Allen's mental state, I think that's going to be the main battleground here.
Because the defense is using it to fight those confessions. But how else does it play into their strategy?
Well, they could go a few ways. They could try to argue he isn't competent to stand trial. That means they'd have to prove he can't understand the charges against him or help in his own defense. Or they could say he was having some kind of episode when he confessed, that he wasn't really involved. It'll be interesting how they use it.
It's a fine line to walk, though, right? They need to address those confessions without ruining their case. What about the prosecution? What are their challenges, other than these confessions?
Honestly, their biggest problem is placing Allen at the scene. They have the gun. Yeah, the unspent bullet they found, it matched one of his guns. That's important. But is it enough? Will there be DNA? Witnesses? They need something solid to convince a jury Allen was there that day.
So we've got this battle of the experts coming up, then the whole mental state debate, and always that question, is there enough evidence? It's a lot.
And it makes you think about how we investigate crimes now. This mix of old school detective work and this new digital world.
Right. This case, it blew up partly because of that Snapchat footage, Libby's video, that creepy audio. It showed everyone what happened right before everything went wrong. Kind of a reminder that even in places that feel safe, bad things can still happen.
And that audio, guys, down the hill, it got to everyone. Not just evidence, it felt personal. Suddenly, it wasn't just a case, it was about real people, thanks to that audio.
It's like we all got more invested because we felt like we heard their voices. But even with that digital glimpse into what happened, this still comes down to good old-fashioned police work, gathering evidence, finding witnesses if there are any, and then all the legal stuff on top of that.
No matter how advanced we get with DNA and all that, sometimes answers just take time. Justice isn't a 45-minute episode, it's messy.
And for Delphi, it's been a long, messy road. Guilty or not guilty, let's hope this brings some peace. A community that's been through hell deserves at least that. We'll be back soon with more Doc Dives, but until then, stay curious, everybody.